Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, thanks for joining today. This is going to be more of a traditional video in line with kind of my style of unboxing rare Apple products that I find online. And if I'm not doing that, I will post some content about Mac computers or guides on how to do certain things like downgrades or software installs. But primarily, I like to unbox vintage iOS devices that are running rare versions of iOS. And that's what we have today. Inside this box is an iPad 3rd generation that is supposed to be running iOS 6. So let's get that opened up and see if that's what we actually have. Okay, here is the iPad. This is a 3rd generation. You can tell from the model and the EMC number. This is also a 64 gigabyte model, so the greatest storage capacity you could get back when this thing was released in early 2012. Looking at the condition of the iPad, it seems to be in really good shape. The screen has no cracks, and I'm really not seeing any scratches. On the back, we do have some, I don't know if that is dirt or if that is a scratch, but we do have some pretty big scratches down here, along with a plethora of fingerprints, which I am continually adding to here. Looking at the corners, I don't see any major dents, which is a good sign. Well, okay, there's a little bit here, but that's all right. We'll live with that. Let's see if this thing has any power when we try to turn it on. And it does. We are greeted with the iOS 6 Apple logo. It could be iOS 5 because that's what the iPad 3 shipped with, but based on the seller description and images, I could tell it was iOS 6, and I kindly asked them not to update the iPad before they shipped it to me, which a lot of people have a tendency to do, and it makes sense to want to update your stuff to the newest version before you list it, but we don't want that here. So we're greeted here with the iOS setup screen. I'll go ahead and go through that, and when we get to the home screen, we'll pick back up. Here we are at the iOS 6 home screen, and this is beautiful to see on a Retina display. If we check inside settings, general, and about, we can see we're on 6.1.3, and this is in fact a 64 gigabyte model. Overall, this device is really clean. We can look at some of the older apps, and the clock design is pretty neat to have all of the different cities from across the world at the top. You can add and delete those. We've got messages. Hopefully there's no account here. There should not be. Notes app. All of the apps have this really nice, the old skeuomorphic design where it's meant to look like its real life counterpart. And I personally think they could bring this back. Now that screens have gotten so good, we were really just getting into the Retina display when this was phased out in both macOS and iOS. So the iPad 3rd gen was released in early 2012 and was quickly replaced by the iPad 4th gen, which improved on this device's capabilities in every way. This was the last iPad to ship with the 30-pin connector before it was replaced with Lightning. But the iPad 3rd gen improved upon the iPad 2nd gen's camera. This was bumped to a 5 megapixel lens, similar to the one found in the iPhone 4. And the iPad 3rd gen doubled the RAM from half a gigabyte up to 1 full gigabyte, the most in any iOS device at the time. While Siri shipped with iOS 5 on the iPhone, it was not introduced onto the iPad until iOS 6. So iOS 6 brought Siri to this specific iPad, the 3rd gen, as well as the 4th gen. But on iOS 5, Siri was not available on this 3rd gen. Potentially the biggest improvement was the display. This was the first iPad to feature a Retina display, which still today looks amazing. It is basically the same display you could buy all the way up until they updated the screen size from 9.7 inches up to, 10.5 on some of the more modern iPads. This was more or less the same display, same pixel density, same resolution, all of that. So unfortunately, the App Store is not working anymore. Unless I get surprised here, which would be nice. Nope, cannot connect. So this is a recent thing. Up until about a few weeks ago, you could use the App Store and you could download apps that had a supported version for iOS 6. Interestingly, Siri now works. So let's give that a try and see if it's working on this device. What was the score of the MLB games last night?
I found 15 MLB games yesterday.
There we go. Even the Siri results are meant to look like they're from a newspaper or like a billboard. Now, Siri does not sound as refined and clean as it does today. But you have to remember, this was 2012 when iOS 6 came out and brought Siri to this iPad. So that is a long time ago. This was also the first iPad to introduce the X variant of a chip. So this had the A5X, which had the same CPU as the iPad 2, but it more or less doubled the graphical performance. And that was needed for this higher resolution display with 4 times as many pixels as the iPad 2. Battery life on this thing seems to be doing just fine. I've learned that iPads, unlike iPhones and iPods, seem to retain their batteries over time much better than their smaller siblings. With the exception of the 1st gen iPad, that iPad I have seen quite a few different ones with completely dead batteries that do not work anymore. So there you have it. There is a look at an iPad 3rd gen, 64 gigabyte, and this is the Wi-Fi model running iOS 6.1.3. This is pretty rare to see, especially today in 2023. These are getting increasingly hard to find. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I know I always enjoy when I get to unbox one of these and take a little time machine and go back to the days of when these iOS versions were released on these older devices. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.